We're in Washington, D.C., and what trip to the nation's capital wouldn't be complete without a conversation with Bob Stallman, the president of the American Farm Bureau Federation. Bob, we finally got things moving. Good news for agriculture on the trade front.
Yes, absolutely. The logjam kind of broke in the Senate with the Democrats and Republicans coming to agreement. So we've moved forward and getting a TPA bill out of the House. Out of committee in the House and the Senate. Now it needs floor action. We need to get it passed as quickly as possible and get it to the president for his signature. That's what the conclusion of the negotiations for the Trans-Pacific Partnership is really waiting on. Our negotiating partners are saying, well, U.S., are you serious? Can you provide TPA where we know that if whatever we agree to at the end and we'll put our best offer on the table, it isn't going to be amended to death by the U.S. Congress, and that's what Trade Promotion Authority does. Negotiators have worked very diligently with the Japanese negotiators to try to figure out a way to open up that market more to U.S. products, and from what I'm hearing, they've done a pretty good job, and that's going to be an additional market now that we don't have, that we will have. But first we got to get TPA passed and then get the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement finished and passed.
As you talk about trade, the European Commission late last week basically come out and said all rules are off. Individual countries, if you want to approve or disapprove of some of those GM traits, that's got to be very confusing only to U.S. farmers, but farmers around the world.
Pretty much just goofy is what I call it. Number one, they have rights and obligations under the WTO. I don't think that they can just now, because they can't get something done internally, say, oh, by the way, each of the countries can do whatever they want. That'd be kind of like the U.S. Saying, okay, Texas, go do whatever you want with any of our trade agreements. It doesn't work that way, and so it's confusing. It, frankly, I think muddies the water even more for the future, and we'll have to figure out a strategy as to how to deal with it.
Is immigration reform dead?
Well, it's not moving very fast. I think there's still life in it. Everyone knows we need to resolve these issues. For agriculture, it's pretty simple. We need to figure out a way to adjust the status of those workers that have been here illegally, but with proper documentation for sometimes decades working in agriculture. So bring them out of the shadows, give them a status where they can continue working legally. And then for the future, we need a ag guest worker program where for those jobs that Americans are not going to do in agriculture, we can continue to bring in workers from outside the borders of this country legally and with documentation, and let them work, and then take their economic benefits back with them to their country.
Almost 4 months now into a new Congress with the Republicans now having control of both the House and the Senate. Are you seeing progress? Are you think that they're at least trying to move forward on things maybe where they haven't in the past? And are we at a point where I guess you're at least somewhat satisfied?
Oh, I don't know if I'm ever satisfied with what Congress does, but at least we have a dynamic where the House and the Senate the House can control the agenda based on the rules of the House and the fact that the R's have had the majority. Now that the Senate has a nominal majority, the Republicans can control that agenda, but you still need 60 votes for major legislation in the Senate, so it still takes some give and take and some compromise. For some issues, though, the legislative packages are going to get vetoed by the president, which we'll have to wait and see how that works.
Bob Stallman, President of the American Farm Bureau. Before we let you go, Farm Bureau has also been one of those leaders when we talk about agriculture data, big data, if you will, and it's on the minds of a lot of producers right now. Probably some are watching this on the tractor while they're getting their spring planting done. How are we progressing there, and are we going to be able to get to a point where we can somewhat define who owns what and how it can be used?
Well, I think we're moving in that direction, and I think the groups that came together, the tech providers, the farmer groups that came together, we all realized this was all kind of brand new and we needed to have a lot of questions put out there and answered. And I think we've moved forward fairly well with the principles that we've developed about who owns the data, who controls the data. And it's still going to be up, that's still a business transaction between an agricultural technology provider and a farmer. And so farmers just need to be aware of what they're signing on to and what rights they have and what rights they don't have. This will, be a period of time like in any new technology. There'll be a lot of shakeout occur, but right now I think we've come to a much greater understanding between the companies and the farmers about some of these principles that are involved.
I said that was last question. One more last question. Farm Bureau, you came up with a statement last week supporting a renewal of the grain inspection system and that needs to make sure that that remains a viable part and kind of a non-partisan way for farmers.
Well, absolutely. You don't want to get into a situation where we had in the western ports where there was some, quote, concern about safety, and all of a sudden inspectors decide they don't want to inspect the grain. I wonder about the safety part, but anyway, it was an excuse. We want to be sure that, whatever happens at ports, that there is an alternative or a way to continue processing, in our case, agricultural products and getting them shipped out. Our customers are waiting on them, and they shouldn't be held hostage to whatever labor disputes going on.
Bob, again, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Bob Stallman, President of the American Farm Bureau Federation, has joined us from Washington. I'm Ken Rogers.